Welcome to the Instructional Technology and Applications Vodcast. I'm your host, Brian Wallace. In today's Vodcast, we'll be discussing Photoshop and two techniques you can use to draw attention to a subject. The first technique we'll discuss is called ghosting. The second technique is called blur. Before we begin, I want to call to your attention the Tools panel. The Tools panel appears at the left of the screen. If you follow my mouse, you can actually see exactly where this is located. You can expand some tools to show hidden tools beneath them. A small triangle at the lower right of the tool icon signals the presence of hidden tools. For the example we'll be using as our selection tool the lasso. The lasso is the third icon from the top of the Tools panel. 1, 2, 3. As you can see by the triangle at the lower right of the tool icon, there are hidden tools. Now if we click on it, it'll expand it, and we can see that there's the lasso tool, and then underneath it there's the polygonal lasso tool and the magnetic lasso tool. Let's begin. Our first technique to draw attention to a specific subject matter is called ghosting. First, what we want to do is open an existing file. What I need you to do is go into File, and then click Open. And this will open up sort of your navigation, and you can go to wherever you have your specific file located. So in my case, I have it on my desktop, and it's called Ghost Tint Halos. Once you've selected your file, please click Open. Next, what we want to do is identify the subject matter that we want to draw attention to. In this example, I'm going to draw attention to this boy and his breakfast. So step 1 in ghosting. In the Tools panel, select the magnetic lasso. The magnetic lasso tool is an edge detection tool, meaning that it actively searches for the edge of the object you're moving around it, then snaps the selection outline to the edge and clings to it like a magnet. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's click on the lasso and then go down to the magnetic lasso tool. So with the magnetic lasso tool, you want to have an anchor point, and then you want to just sort of do short little points so that you have the best control over your subject matter, and that the magnet knows exactly the content that you want to sort of lasso. So now I'm working around his ear, and sort of work down his jaw and sort of work down his neck, and now we're going to work down his shoulder. Okay, now we're going to begin on his hand, down by his finger. Start working on the placemat. Bottom of his cup. Now we're going to do the bottom of his milk glass. Move on over to his bowl. Move to the lip here. Start working our way around the strawberries. Go up the milk glass. Go across. Click on his hand. Go up his arm. Get his first knuckle, second knuckle, third knuckle, fourth knuckle. Work our way down his finger to his thumb. And then work our way up his ear. Work our way up the rest of his hair. And then reconnect to the original anchor point. Once you've lassoed your subject matter, we're ready to move on to step 2. In step 2, go to the top navigation panel, click on Select, and then Inverse. By clicking on the inverse, we're telling Photoshop that we only want to affect the background, not, in the case of this example, the boy and his breakfast. So again, let's go up to Select, and then click on Inverse. So you can now see that the entire background has been selected. So in the next step, in step 3, we want to go back to the top navigation panel and click Layer, then click New Adjustment Layer, and then click Hue Saturation. So again, first step is to go up to Layer, go down to New Adjustment Layer, and then go down to Hue Saturation. Click OK. And just so you guys know, there are shortcuts in Photoshop. We could have gone to the same step by going down to the shortcut icons down here, and as you'll see, there's this half-filled circle. If we were to click on that, we could have just gone straight down to the hue saturation right there. So by doing this, you can sort of see that it's created a masking layer that protects the boy and his breakfast. So now in step 4, what we want to do is click on the saturation lever and drag it all the way to the left. Saturation lever is right here, and let's click all the way to the left. By doing so, you can now see that the background is completely grayed out and our subject matter remains in full color. This technique is called ghosting. Okay, we're going to sort of go back in time now for our next technique, which is called blurring. So what we would normally do is we would identify our subject matter, we would then use the magnetic lasso, and then we would select inverse, just as we did for ghosting. So I'm going to actually go into the history and go back to that area. So we are now to where we have selected the inverse. So whereas ghosting, we actually went up to layer, and then new adjustment layer, and then hue saturation. And this one, what we're actually going to do is go over to what's called filter, and then we're going to go down to blur. And here's a number of different blurs that you can use. Personally, I like the Duquesne blur. So I'm going to click on that. You can sort of see in the background here, you can sort of create the amount of blur that you want. So do you want everything in the background to be somewhat identifiable? You may only want to do a slight blur. Or if you want things to be really out of focus, you're going to want an extreme blur. So let's do somewhere a little bit where things are a little bit identifiable, but not too much. There we go. So let's do about a 4.9. Let's make it even go up to just a good 5.0 pixels. Now if you click on OK, then do on your computer, now I'm using a Mac, so I would do Command D for deselect. You can now see that the entire background is blurred, where our subject matter is clearly defined. So this is just another technique that you can use. So you can either use blur or ghosting if you want to draw attention to your subject matter. Thank you for watching today's Vodcast, Instructional Technology and Applications. I'm your host, Brian Wallace. Please join us next week as we learn more techniques in Photoshop, including masking.